record. Okay, and then now I'm going to share the screen, but I'm going to share the recording on the screen. Where is the screen?
Good morning, Frankie.
Morning, Frankie.
Who else is on here?
Sometimes Tracy's with us. Okay, I need to find, there it is, the BEMA. All right, I think I got it. Are we ready?
This is the BEMA podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host Brent Billings. Today we consider the idea that John has been deliberately drawing off of apocalyptic prophets while speaking directly into culture, and we add one more layer to our hermeneutical toolbox as it relates to the book of Revelation.
All right, so we're going to take an in-depth look. We're going to try to apply this whole thing. Like we just dipped our toe into the whole package this last episode. Now we're going to try to do this whole thing. So we're going to take an in-depth look at the letter of Thyatira, letter to Thyatira, in order to fully understand the principles that we just introduced in the last episode. In this first part, we'll be studying the culture. We want to look at culture, cultural context of Thyatira, to understand the cultural relevance of the letter itself. Then in part 2, we're going to look at where John is getting his material and the brilliant way he is using Old Testament text to preach a sermon within the letter to Thyatira. So first, let's spend time in the first part of this thought process. We need a background on Thyatira itself. All right, so by far the smallest of the 7 church cities, Thyatira was estimated to be around 25 to 30,000 people. The city sat on the main road and was founded by Seleucus the First around 300 BC. Or it could have been Eumenes the First around 250 BC, depending on which historian you're talking to. But it was founded as a military outpost. Very much unlike places such as Smyrna, Thyatira was very blue collar. So we said Smyrna. What was like one of the things we talked about with Smyrna, Brent? They like to distinguish their class with the use of
Crowns.
Crowns, right? So we talked about crowns in Smyrna, and it kind of if you really kind of pictured it and thought about it, it was kind of highfalutin, really sophisticated, educated white robes, silver and gold, crowns on your head. This is not Thyatira. Thyatira is blue collar, unsophisticated in its demographic. Thyatira was a hard-working city full of labor guilds. In fact, we found a list of the registered guild. We haven't found much. Thyatira. Tell me about your experience at Thyatira, Brent.
It's like one square city block. There's not much to it at this point. It's right in the middle of a modern city.
Absolutely, a huge modern city, and to say city block is even pretty generous. It is a small little quarter of a section. But yeah, so we haven't found a ton archaeologically, but we have found little bits. We found a lot on coins and money, currency, often one of the places you'll learn the most. And we did find their guild registry in Thyatira. It's one of the longest registries we've ever uncovered. Now consider that, one of the largest guild registries. And we've talked about guild a few times now, Brent, so I don't think we have to keep going back and reviewing that, but that cross between a labor union and a college fraternity, the brotherhood of the fraternity, the commitment of a labor union together, the security of that was your guild. Now consider the smallest of the 7 cities and one of the largest guild registries we've ever found. That means you have a lot of working class people, a lot of laboring class.
We're talking about number of industries that they represent, or
Yes.
is it the list of actual members?
No, the list of the different guilds themselves.
So basically, if you need something done, you go to Thyatira and they can take care of you.
Yeah, think Pittsburgh, think, industrial, and maybe that was Pittsburgh ages ago, but think a city that's just built around industry, manufacturing. That's Thyatira. The guilds in the city included, here's your list, Brent: leather workers, wool workers, weavers, bakers, tailors, dyers, candle makers, cobblers, potters, bronzesmiths, blacksmiths, slave merchants, dyers of purple cloth, and stone cutters, just to name a few. For a city the size of Thyatira, that list is long, and the jobs are for hard workers. One of the leading guilds of Thyatira was an extensive network of bronzesmiths. They specialized in a very famous kind of bronze that we know in the English as burnished bronze. In a world that didn't have the glass technology of today, burnished bronze was the material used to produce the closest thing to mirrors that they had. The Greek word for this special bronze was called kalabanos. What little we know about Thyatira comes mostly from coins and currency circulated through the area. The one thing that we do know about the worship of Thyatira was that their chief god was Tyrimnos. You ever heard of Tyrimnos before our study, Brent? Is that a Greek god you ever bumped into?
No.
No, I haven't made a Marvel movie related to Tyrimnos at all. Tyrimnos, well, go figure, some Marvel lore character is going to come out of nowhere and email me and let me know that he's in some random movie reference somewhere. Tyrimnos was the son of Zeus. Scholars have always found this to be quite perplexing, as Tyrimnos is certainly not a major player in the Greco-Roman Olympiad of gods. Why choose such an obscure god to worship? Some have suggested it's because such a blue-collar city would have wanted to root for the underdog. Others have pointed to an obscure reference to the honor of a very young son of Domitian who passed away while still an infant. One inscription was found where the late son was being held by Domitian in the image on the coin, and the child held the 7 stars. We talked about the 7 stars already, Brent. 7 stars meaning, what did it mean? Remind us.
The 7 angels.
You could say that. In the Roman world, though, the 7 stars were those 7 stars that didn't move with the rest of the zodiac.
Gods themselves, I guess.
Yeah. So holding the 7 stars is a way of saying, I can get you where you want to go. I think we looked at that in Revelation 1, if I'm not mistaken. This child of Domitian, and the coin is holding the 7 stars in his hand. Could the choice to worship Tyrimnos be a pointed reference to the son of Domitian, who died? They wanted to honor. It's possible. One last point of interest about Thyatira is the presence of a Jewish prophetess that operated as a Sibyl shrine by the name of Sambate.
Now spell Sybil for me.
Sibyl, S-Y-B-I-L. S-Y-B-I-L. A Sibyl is like Sibyl shrines were like minor league oracles, which we talked all the way back in the book of Romans in our long episode about predestination. We started off that episode talking about oracles and how oracles operated. And we talked about how Rome had 4 main oracles: the oracle at Claros, at Didyma, at Delphi, and there's always somewhere else I can never remember. They had 4 of them. But if you couldn't, or your question wasn't as big of enough a deal that you wanted to go all the way to a true oracle, you could always go to a Sibyl, like a minor league oracle that you might have in your own town.
That was episode 153.
153. So those Sibyl shrines were like minor league oracles and dealt in pagan witchcraft. And apparently, from what we can gather from the little information we have, Sambate was a big proponent of the Roman labor system and the many guilds that not only powered the local labor force, but also, if you remember, those same guilds would have been steeped in what kind of practices, Brent?
Pagan rituals.
Pagan idolatry, and sexual immorality. These same 2 things that keep haunting us throughout this entire study. So, and if you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, so she was a Jew, but she was dealing in witchcraft? If you're like trying to make that compute, you should be, because it's not supposed to compute. That does not work according to the book of Leviticus. It is not right, and yet, according to history, what's going on anyway.
It doesn't work is not maybe this strong enough language.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and look at the letter to Thyatira. I'm going to have Brent read the letter to Thyatira, and we're going to keep our eyes peeled for culture, just culture. Of all the things we talked about, watch in this letter for culture, all right? Go ahead, Brent.
To the angel of the church in Thyatira write, These are the words of the Son of God, whose eyes are like blazing fire, and whose feet are like burnished bronze. I know your deeds, your love and faith, your service and perseverance, and that you are now doing more than you did at first. Nevertheless, I have this against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet. By her teaching, she misleads my servants into sexual immorality and the eating of food sacrificed to idols. I have given her time to repent of her immorality, but she is unwilling. So I will cast her on a bed of suffering, and I will make those who commit adultery with her suffer intensely, unless they repent of her ways. I will strike her children dead. Then all the churches will know that I am he who searches hearts and minds, and I will repay each of you according to your deeds. Now I say to the rest of you in Thyatira, to you who do not hold to her teaching and have not learned Satan's so-called deep secrets, I will not impose any other burden on you except to hold on to what you have until I come. To the one who is victorious and does my will to the end, I will give authority over the nations. That one will rule them with an iron scepter and will dash them to pieces like pottery, just as I have received authority from my Father. I will also give that one the morning star. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
All right, so we were listening for culture, and this is not going to be an exhaustive or comprehensive list, but we're definitely going to make our point here. Let's grab a few of these references. These are the words of the Son of God. This is the only reference to Son of God in all the letters to the 7 churches. Like of all those 7 letters, not once is a Son of God referenced, except in this letter. Why here? Is it because of their worship centered on the son of Zeus, the Son of God, and or the son of Domitian? For any of those options, it's fitting that that reference would be found here, not in Ephesus, not in Sardis, not in Smyrna, but it would be found here. How about the reference feet like burnished bronze? Their main export coming out of Thyatira, called Kalabanos. How about your service and perseverance? What does that make you think of, Brent? Your service and perseverance.
They're hardworking guild members.
Absolutely. Hardworking military town, blue collar. You tolerate that woman Jezebel. Here we have an obvious reference to that Sibyl oracle, Sambati, and the shrine that she works at. How about the next one? She misleads my servants into sexual immorality and the eating of food sacrificed to idols. This points to that ever-present temptation, just like in Pergamum, to engage in guild feasts that would have been widely available to them in a city like Thyatira, almost like no other.
Sexual immorality listed first. Food sacrificed to idols listed second this time.
Ah, very interesting. Yeah, and John could be doing that very much on purpose.
If he's not, I'm shocked.
If there's one thing I've learned about John. Let's see here. I will cast her on a bed of suffering. The actual reference in the Greek is to the word kleine. We get the word recliner from that, kleine, which is the same word used to reference a guild couch. Those guild couches is where the sexual immorality would actually happen at the guild feast. So God says he's going to throw her on a kleine. You could read, I'm going to throw her on a guild couch of suffering. Later he says, I will strike her children dead. This could be a possible reference to the dead child of Domitian. Satan's so-called deep secrets. What do you think of when I say that, Brent? Satan's so-called deep secrets.
Good question.
Is anybody digging out Satan's so-called? Anybody have special access to Satan's so-called deep secrets?
Special access.
Yeah.
I don't know.
These oracles were known to be channeling the god Apollo, the god of the underworld. So if I were to say Satan's so-called deep secrets, you might think of
the oracles.
The oracle, and they're getting secret from the underworld. Iron scepter, references to pottery. What do you think of when I think of that?
Well, just more guilds represented.
Yep, more guilds. The Potter's Guild, the Blacksmith's Guild, both of those guilds were on the guild list. I will also give that one the Morning Star, would be the last one that I'm going to pull out here. And we finally have the son of Domitian who held the stars in his hand. Every single line, and we did miss some references here, Brent, but I've done it in my live lessons before. Every line of this letter, every sentence of this letter to Thyatira comes directly from the immediate culture of the city. And remember, this is a city we don't even have a ton of archaeology done in. Like there's not even a whole lot we even know about the city, and yet we know enough to know that every single line at least could be referencing culture. The letter is stunning in its clever cultural relevance. But now we want to ask the question of what is the source for John's material? Like, where is he getting his material? And you think to yourself, well, from culture, Marty, you just told me. But we hinted at last episode.
Not really a hint.
Yeah, we explored it. We dipped our toe. Now we want to fully immerse you. All right, here we go. So now that we've appreciated the cultural backdrop for the letter to Thyatira, we're going to turn our attention to appreciate the way that John uses his command of Tanakh to continue a teaching well below the surface about the struggle of the church there in Thyatira. A little backstory in the text will be helpful, although it may feel unrelated when we first go over it. So let's talk about King Solomon, Brent. King Solomon, he was building the temple back in the good old Testament, back in session 2, We talked about Solomon building the temple in the story of Kings and Chronicles. One of the grave mistakes that he made was in not allowing the people of God to do the work on the temple itself. Unlike the construction of the tabernacle, led by Bezalel and Aholiab, Solomon outsourced the work of certain specialists, namely that of bronzesmiths and stonecutters. So Solomon didn't use Hebrew bronzesmiths. He didn't use Hebrew stonecutters. They probably weren't the best in the world, and Solomon wanted the best in the world, so he went and got them from other countries. Solomon made an arrangement with Huram, the king of Phoenicia, and in exchange for the labor of his best bronzesmiths and stonecutters, Solomon gave him 20 towns in the Galilee as payment for their service. Many streams of Jewish teaching show it was this agreement that paved the way for Phoenician-Israelite relations that would eventually culminate in the treaties of Omri and Ahab, particularly the marriage of Ahab to the Phoenician high priestess of Asherah, a woman by the name of Jezebel. Now, if we need to remind ourselves of Phoenicia, we actually used Phoenicia as an example, Brent, in our Joshua podcast. I think it was the first podcast of session 2 after the introduction.
Yeah, that would be episode 34.
34. And I think it was titled The Hardest Story in the Bible for me. And that was a hard podcast to listen to and to do because we unpacked all the pagan rituals and what the pagan nations were doing. Part of that was Asherah worship. Asherah worship was connected to the Baal worship. The Baal worship was where the child sacrifice was happening. The Asherah worship is where you had to spend time with the shrine prostitutes and buy Asherah dolls, and it was all about your sexual mortality and fertility and all of these things. And Israel marries their king on purpose because of political concerns. They marry their king Ahab to the high priestess of Asherah worship, a woman by the name of
Jezebel.
Many rabbis will teach that were it not for Solomon's poor choices with Huram, there would have never been rampant idolatry in Israel, because it was Solomon and his choices that started the relationship that they're trying to maintain generations later. So many rabbis will say it's Solomon who introduced us to Phoenician idolatry. But I digress. Or do I? Let's go back and look for text. So I'm going to have Brent read that letter one more time. But this time I want us all to keep our ear open for Old Testament references as we read through the letter to Thyatira one more time.
To the angel of the church in Thyatira write, These are the words of the Son of God, whose eyes are like blazing fire and whose feet are like burnished bronze. I know your deeds, your love and faith, your service and perseverance, and that you are now doing more than you did at first. Nevertheless, I have this against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet. By her teaching, she misleads my servants into sexual immorality and the eating of food sacrificed to idols. I have given her time to repent of her immorality, but she is unwilling. So I will cast her on a bed of suffering, and I will make those who commit adultery with her suffer intensely, unless they repent of her ways. I will strike her children dead. Then all the churches will know that I am he who searches hearts and minds, and I will repay each of you according to your deeds. Now I say to the rest of you in Thyatira, to you who do not hold to her teaching, and have not learned Satan's so-called deep secrets, I will not impose any other burden on you except to hold on to what you have until I come. To the one who is victorious and does my will to the end, I will give authority over the nations, that one will rule them with an iron scepter and will dash them to pieces like pottery, just as I have received authority from my Father. I will also give that one the morning star. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
All right, so let's talk about some textual references here. Whose eyes are like blazing fire and whose feet are like burnished bronze. Coming right out of one of those apocalyptic books. Daniel, chapter 10, provides the details that John references here. Daniel's main teaching point is that the people of God have to persevere. If you remember the story of Daniel, he's getting thrown into the fiery furnace. He is praying, even though they tell him not to. He's eating vegetables instead of the diet that the king wants. It's all, the story of Daniel is a story of perseverance. Perseverance through persecution specifically. And yet that's what the people of Thyatira are going through. What does John say next? Your service and perseverance. A very fitting reference. Obviously, the next reference is about Jezebel, that woman Jezebel, who misleads my servants into sexual immorality and the eating of food sacrificed to idols. Horribly fitting reference, or wonderfully fitting, however you want to put it. Fitting reference to Sambate, John mentions another Jewish prophetess who enticed Israel into idolatry and sexual immorality. And if you remember, Asherah worship was centered around the fertility goddess and sexual promiscuity. So Jezebel's a fitting reference here from the text. I will cast her on a bed of suffering. How was Jezebel killed in the Old Testament? By being cast out of a window. I will strike her children dead, John says. What happened to Jezebel's children? They were all struck dead. This entire teaching is pulled perfectly from the text. How about this reference? I am he that searches hearts and minds. There are a few options here. It could be a reference directly to Psalm 139:23, or it could be a word-for-word reference out of Jeremiah 17. I think it's a reference to Jeremiah, and I'll tell you more about that and why that is in a moment. How about one more reference? How about I will rule them? I got more than one reference. How about I will rule them with an iron scepter? We'll dash them to pieces like pottery. Usually your Bible will even catch this and give you the direct reference to
Psalm 2.
Psalm 2, okay?
The only one that's actually pulled out in the footnotes.
Absolutely. And most of your study Bibles will catch that reference. What they often don't catch is that Psalm 2 is written about the one who God says, you are my son. Wait, the Son of God Psalm is being referenced in the only letter to mention Son of God? This is almost too much. I hope this is starting to hit our listeners, and it's starting to sink in and take root in our consciousness what John is doing here. He's doing both simultaneously. He's doing culture and text simultaneously at the same time with the same words. It's not like half of the sentence is about the text and half the sentence about culture. The same sentence is simultaneously pulled from text and speaking to culture perfectly. How about the morning star? A lot of people are going to think about Isaiah or Ezekiel and a bunch of incorrect mistranslations and wrong references. This idea is actually pulled directly from Numbers 24 and the last oracle of Balaam. Well, we've talked about Balaam now probably 3 or 4 times, Brent. What is Balaam going to be known for?
Well, how many things? I mean, it's known for a number of things.
Yes. What have we been chatting about with the Midrash in reference to Balaam and what he's responsible for when it came to the Israelites in the book of Numbers?
I actually am not familiar enough with the story of Balaam to know what part is in Numbers and what part comes from the Midrash. So
if you can just remember the Midrash, it says that Balaam's the one responsible for.
Is it the Midrash where he has them send in the prostitutes?
Right. So Numbers 24 is the last oracle of Balaam. Numbers 25 is Moab seduces Israel. And the Midrash bridges the gap.
The Midrash is where it says that
he's the one that actually provokes Balak to do that, right? So Balaam is a reference to sexual morality and idolatry. Isn't idolatry and sexual morality the very issues that John is trying to warn us about directly in this letter?
Over and over and over again.
So these references are perfectly chosen. Daniel to communicate perseverance, and Balaam to communicate the struggle with sexual immorality and idolatry, but we still aren't done. The other references are going to work perfectly as well. The letter starts and ends with a direct reference to Psalm 2, a psalm we've seen before, but when we saw it before, it's been linked through a beautiful Gezerah Shavah to Psalm 118. Both those psalms end up being linked to Solomon. Psalm 2 is a psalm written about Solomon. David is writing the psalm saying, today I've called you my son. And who is David's son, Brent, in that psalm? We always think Jesus when we hear it. But when David wrote the psalm, what did David mean when he wrote, today you are my son?
He's talking about Solomon.
Talking about Solomon. Wasn't Solomon the guy we pointed out responsible for the whole mess surrounding Jezebel? And that was the next reference in John's letter. Jezebel was the very next play that would lead into the searches the hearts and minds reference. And I told you Jeremiah was my choice. Why Jeremiah? Because Jeremiah 17, where the quote is pulled from, starts out with these words. Judah's sin is engraved with an iron tool, inscribed with a flint point on the tablets of their hearts, and on the horns of their altars. Even their children remember their altars and Asherah poles beside the spreading trees and on every high hill. Well, what was Jezebel connected to, Brent? The worship of
Asherah.
Of Asherah. So we have Solomon, first reference, Link to Jezebel, second reference. Link to Asherah poles, third reference. John quotes a Jeremiah passage that directly references the Asherah worship introduced by Jezebel, who was referenced earlier, which is a result of a bad relationship that began with Solomon, who is referenced in both ends of the letter. It's hard to communicate the complex brilliance John is displaying here in his writing of Revelation. I'm realizing now how hard this is to communicate via podcast, Brent Billings. This is
Thank you.
a stunning. Not only is John brilliantly writing about the cultural setting on his day, he's using biblical quotations to do it. This would be impressive enough, but John is actually choosing his biblical quotations from stories that are already teaching to the cultural context at hand. It's almost impossible to believe what the book is doing before our eyes. Stunning. To quote one of my favorite teachers, it's almost like the author had help.
Yes. It's truly incredible.
Most of this is lost on us as we look toward the future and we try to read Revelation. We try to interpret the headlines of our newspapers through the words of Revelation. We're trying to place the happenings of our current world and our understanding of eschatology and rapture theology, and we completely miss the message that objective historical study reveals to us right in front of our nose. We want to carry this lesson that we learned today in this episode. We need to carry this with us as we continue to study the book of Revelation on through the end of session 4.
Got a lot more work to do in Revelation.
We do. And if you feel like you're kind of drowning, that's okay. We'll get lots of practice by the time we're done.
Yeah. But hey, if you're caught up and you need to, like, go back and review the Revelation episode.
All right, stop share.
Did he say he was a bit lost too?
Yeah. Can you guys hear us?
Yes.
All right. Thoughts? That was well worth listening to, I thought.
Absolutely.
What did you guys pick up? Were you surprised by? Like, share your thoughts if you have gathered them yet. I feel like it makes you realize like what a prolific writer John was. And going back to I think it was our first day when we talked about how he wrote in a way that the Roman soldiers wouldn't have understood, but
Right.
the Christians would have. And I think that's really prevalent right here, where he used all Old Testament.
Are we keeping track of our 300 references?
No, we can probably Google it. Google probably tell us what they are. But I like also that the connection with Solomon and him connecting to the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians
Yeah.
were also an issue with the tribe of Dan. So when we were in Israel, I think I've already shared this with you guys before, but I talked to a lot of people, so I don't remember. But where Gaza Strip is, that land was supposed to be where Dan went. They chose not to go there. They were disobedient, and they went north next to the Phoenicians' land because that's where the money was. And so Dan, if you look at the map, is clear at the north, but they should have been in the Gaza Strip. And we'll find here later in Revelation, they're not even included in the list of the tribes, which I find really interesting. But so this is not the first time the Phoenicians have come up. So Solomon connected himself to the Phoenicians. So, I mean, I think it goes to us too. Like, I feel like empire, and when they talk about empire and world, they're talking about our system of money and greed and men, holding on to things and choosing the worldly things over God. If you got a chance to go out and listen to that video I posted on YouTube, she's really good about talking about the temptation for her to be this famous singer and then recognizing that she had to let go and go completely into the Lord. Anyway, that was my thoughts. What are you guys' thoughts?
That was over my head, to be honest.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't comment on that. It's just way more deep than I'm capable of right now. But I appreciate all your input and explanation.
You talking about what I said or what they said?
Both. No,
Okay.
more what they said. I understood what you said more. It was more in a understandable context for me. But what they said, I was pretty lost.
Well, he was
But
just he was connecting how John was writing in references to things that had already happened in the Bible. So he was referencing to the culture of what was going on in their day, but he was also referencing to the Old Testament and then how these things are all connected and led to where they were. Any other input?
That's what I was
Okay.
thinking. It really shows, excuse me, the actions and behaviors of the past, thousands of years ago, are still affecting us today and the future.
Well, I was going to say, isn't that kind of what we do now, though? I mean, the Bible is still relevant today. I mean, and so they were just,
Nothing new under the sun. No. It's sad though.
No, and you know what else is scary though, is that if you're biblically illiterate, you know nothing. Like you can be pulled into anything because you have no clue, no discernment, no relationship really, because this is how we have a relationship with the Lord.
But the fact that this all stemmed from what the wisest man ever
Yes, true, Solomon.
did.
Really? Yeah.
so I got the connection between the Old Testament and what John was writing and their explanation of that. It was just, I was it's just when they reference specific events and so forth, so a lot of that I'm not familiar with. So then it becomes, I'm trying to think about what they're saying and I get bogged down and trying to remember and put it together. But
Yeah. You can always go
Yeah.
back and listen to it if you just Google BEMA podcast 178. Because
Yeah.
I mean, this is the third time I listened to it. So it was clicking more with me this time, but
Wish he'd spell some stuff.
I know I wrote some words down. I wrote down
Tyramyrus or
Timarana,
Yeah.
Timaranus. I also wrote down Simbate because he named her, but also that oracle thing. The shrines, they were Sybil, but they were also called Simbatha whenever I looked them up. So I felt like, was he saying her name was Simbatha? Like I was confused.
or was her name Sybil? I thought her
Well, Sybil was, so there's something about this oracle. If anybody was able, I did not retain this.
And
I
what's
couldn't-
an oracle?
What is an oracle?
That's
What-
I said.
What is an oracle? Because whatever these shrines were like smaller versions of an oracle. He said he did an episode in 153 about it, what a true oracle was. Does anybody know what it is?
I only know it to be that they are a predictor of future,
No.
kind of like
So
a
then-
CRS type thing.
So these Sybil shrines, the first thing I thought about, wasn't there like a movie called Sybil
Yeah.
Yeah, there was.
that was like evil?
Well, she had like 100 personalities.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
And that comes usually from sexual abuse.
Yes.
Mhm.
And they found out later it was a made up story, that none of that happened to her.
Oh, you're kidding.
Mm-mm.
It made him a lot of money, didn't it?
It
that
did.
was Sally Fields.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
That's
was.
what I thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sally Field.
I'm gonna look up.
I saw that movie. It was horrible.
I'm gonna
Christy,
look up
what
the
are you
word.
looking at?
Oracle. Are you looking it up?
I already have it. Yeah. A
okay.
priest or priestess acting as a medium through whom advice or prophecy was sought from the gods in classical antiquity.
Okay, that makes sense to what Cindy said. So then what's a Sybil shrine? Sybil. Because he said that was a smaller version of a true oracle.
Well, I don't know. I wonder if that's like a shrine to me. It's like you go there to honor, worship, get insight, reflect. So I was
Can you
confused because I thought, okay, we have the prophetess, And then he mentioned shrine.
Yeah, Sybil, Cybil. No, not C, Sybil. Sorry.
Sybilshrine.
Yeah,
Sybil Shrine.
yeah. Oh, I saw your face.
I thought it was CYBI.
I wrote S.
The movie was C.
Oh, was it?
Mhm.
CYBIL. It's not
She
coming
said
up
the-
with an S.
Okay,
Yeah.
try C.
C.
He spelled it.
He did.
I thought he said it S. I thought he did too.
No, I just.
Did I do
Oh.
right off?
Sybil check.
It's a SIBYLS shrine, SHRINE, is a homage to the SIBYLS Sibyls, the original priestess of the black goddess MAMI, Mammy, WATA, a term which in Greek history was used to name the guardians of the matriarch.
Hmm.
So the oracle would be the main or the matriarch, maybe? Well, and I tried to look up son of Zeus, Temeriah, or Tyrannus. I didn't find that either. But he said Zeus would have been their main god, but depending on which culture, like Roman or whatever, Greek, they would have had different names for him.
I spell that Zeus.
I spelled Zeus.
He said Apollo was the god of the underworld. I never knew that.
Also interesting, the Asherah poles. Like I didn't realize that Jezebel was the main. I guess in my head I never comprehended in reading that she was the main priestess.
We studied about them a lot. Remember, well, when we studied about they'd have sex under every green
Yeah,
tree.
and then yeah, the eggs roll out. By the way.
Hmm.
But they also said it was a political move on Israel's part to marry Ahab to Jezebel.
Yeah,
Mm.
because Solomon did that a lot. He had 800 wives, I think.
Oh, he built his wives shrines to their own gods. That was one of the things that God was upset with him for,
Yeah.
because he was so true to God and he got mixed up with these women and he built shrines to their gods. That got him in trouble.
Disobedience will do that.
But I did not realize that Solomon was the one that initiated all this Phoenician help, with his building. I didn't realize that.
I had no idea.
I didn't know that either.
What book of the Bible did he build the temple in?
What?
Which book of the Bible explains Solomon building the temple? We may have
Probably
to go,
Kings.
we may have to go back and redo that.
Yeah, I don't think we didn't study the Kings. I don't think.
Well, then when we do.
And then there's the Chronicles also. So it'd probably be between those two. Well, we could read them chronologically. Because we have that chronological order. We could go in and start reading First Kings. Well, and I think too, there's something with Saul that went back even further, that Saul was supposed to kill off an entire people. And I want to say that it would have been Ahab's people. Let me see. And he didn't. And that allowed some of this, again, what Cindy said, like we are still dealing today with the choices.
Yeah, like Adam and Eve.
Yep. Who was King Saul? King Saul supposed to kill off in the Bible? Okay, First Samuel, it says go back to the Amalekites and completely destroy everything they have. So Amalekites. Who are the descendants of Ahab? Maybe there's a better way to word that. Were the Amalekites Ahab's descendants? Maybe
Yes.
better.
Or who were the Amalekites descended from?
I think it was a lot of information. I had to comprehend.
That's kind of what Kimmy said. Yeah, it was a lot of information, but I couldn't take
Because I'm listening to it, yeah, but
How do you spell Amalekites? A-M. It is Amalekites. Amalekites were the descendants of Esau.
Oh. That makes sense too. They was bad.
All right, I'm just not asking it the right way. What did you say? I already had that typed in.
Who were the Amalekites? Well, you've already found that out. They were descendants of
Esau.
Esau.
But I want to know who Ahab's descendants were.
Well, according to Ray Stevens, the Arabs.
Yeah, he was the king of the burning sands.
Cindy, what time are you coming up Thursday?
I'll probably be there around noon or a little after.
Oh, Haman was a
Okay.
relative of the Amalekites.
Yeah, he was bad too.
King Ahab was from this is Ahab the Israelite. This is probably from their Bible. All right. Well, I'll drive myself crazy. Any other thoughts?
No, it was a lot, like Kim said. Are we starting chapter 3?
We will be starting chapter 3. We'll start chapter 3, not this coming week, but the next Monday, the church of Sardis, the church in Sardis. I really enjoy taking our time to gather information, really get a good, solid understanding of these churches and the culture. And now we got to think, are we doing the same thing? And I think we are in today's culture.
Yeah.
There's that
Mirror.
past connection to the church in their day connection and connection to us, a mirror to us. Yep. Any last thoughts before we conclude the reading of God's word for today?
Oh, Grant feels
Good
better.
stuff.
It's
Good
good.
stuff. And I need to review.
Thank you.
With that,
What'd you say, Kim?
Good stuff. And I need to review.
oh yeah. Don't worry, we'll be going through it again in another year because
Yeah, every 6 months.
we've already done this once and we're still gaining all this. So it's
we
interesting.
started this year with it.
Yeah, we started out in January, finishing Revelation, I think, didn't we? Anyway.
I finished it.
All right, ladies, have a happy Thanksgiving if I don't see you before.
Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving.
Bye.